Hi everyone. When Max was a little guy, he had and read a series of books by a Terry Deary called Horrible Histories. They had a natural appeal to kids. There was a humorous flavor to them. The focus was on, as it puts on its cover, history with all the nasty bits left in, and foul facts, all the gore and more. As believers, people of faith, we know we should read the Bible, but perhaps we want to leave out the nasty bits of history, or what we consider to be the boring bits, the lists of names hard to pronounce, the temple furniture lists, the hard to understand prophetic passages. And so, like kids, we go to our favorite passages or parts. We want to find quick edifying, something that we can easily make personal application of. But why should we read the whole Bible, Old and New Testament, regularly? I want to strongly promote a yearly Bible reading schedule. Why should we read the Old Testament? That seems to be the one we neglect the most. The Apostle Paul describes the Old Testament as the oracles of God entrusted to the Jews. That's in Romans chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. Paul commends and encourages Timothy to continue in what he had learned and was assured by from childhood, the Holy Scriptures. That's in 2 Timothy 3, verses 14 to 16. Not only had the early church come to accept and believe that Jesus was the promised Messiah of the Old Testament, they had learned from the Old Testament the ways of God and the faithfulness of God as a covenant keeper, the God who showed grace as well as judgment. They learned to love and fear God. So the Old Testament served as a kind of primary school for the believers. How did God teach man in his infancy? How did God instruct and guide his children? The Pentateuch is described as the words of the Lord written out by Moses and read to all the people of Israel. Moses' successor, Joshua, is instructed in Joshua 1 verse 8. I've written it out here. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. Then in Deuteronomy, instruction is given to anyone who is made the king, who sits on the kingly throne. In Deuteronomy 17, verses 18 to 20, this is the instruction. He, the king, shall write for himself a copy of this law in a book from the one before the priests, the Levites, and it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, and be careful to observe all the words of this law and these statutes, that his heart may not be lifted above his brethren, that he may not turn aside from the commandment to the right or to the left. Later, we hear of King Josiah and Ezra reading in the hearing of all the Israelites, young and old. What was the goal or aim of a written word read and heard repeatedly? I wanted to share with you some information that I found in the Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible. It's a 4-volume dictionary set with another volume as a supplement. In its article on education, Old Testament education, it says this: The Hebrews are strongly enjoined to teach their children the powerful memories of the redemption of Israel from the bondage in Egypt and its entry into Canaan, and by the most effective method, that of arousing the children's curiosity. After setting up the 12 stones taken from the Jordan, Joshua says to the people of Israel, "When your children ask their fathers in time to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let your children know Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground." The Passover sacrifice and the eating of the unleavened bread are to serve to prompt the children to ask why these things were done. And the Israelite father is commanded to teach his children their historic and religious symbolism. These vivid memories of the redemption from Egypt and great wonders that God showed to Israel in establishing and protecting its nationhood are used as primary educational factors through to the late period of the First Commonwealth. In various portions of Deuteronomy, we find the same injunctions to remember the testimonies and ordinances connected with the Exodus and to teach them to the children. The educational aim of transmitting the ethical heritage is already stated succinctly in Genesis. "I have chosen him, Abraham, that he may charge his children and his household after him, to keep the way of the Lord, by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised him." Righteousness and justice are embodied in the Decalogue of Exodus 20, verses 1 to 17, and are given religious sanction in Leviticus 19, verse 2. "You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." Immediately following the opening verse, and in the rest of the same chapter, there follow commandments regarding reverence for parents, providing gleanings for the poor and for the sojourner, prohibitions of stealing, of false dealings, of lying and false oaths, of oppression of neighbors, servants, and the physically handicapped. Included are injunctions for ethical dealings between man, and various other commandments which make for the good and just society, including respect for the aged, love for strangers. These ideas of social justice are intimately associated with and proceed from the holiness of God, and this fellowship in God's holiness and love for God is the key precept, along with God's unity, which is commanded to be taught by the Israelites to his children in Deuteronomy 6, verse 7. It is the following of these precepts of ethics and morality which constitute the fear of the Lord, which is considered the beginning of knowledge in Proverbs 1, verse 7, and Proverbs 9, verse 10, and which will lead to the good life on earth. Then it continues to talk about the priesthood. In the Levitical code, among the general duties of the sons of Aaron is the injunction to teach the people of Israel. This function of the priesthood continued to be quite important to the final period of the First Commonwealth. Jehoshaphat sent learned priests and Levites to travel throughout all the cities of Judah and teach the people, using the book of the law of the Lord as a text. Under Josiah, the function of teaching the people was among the duties of the Levites, and during this period and later, This Levitical function was recognized by the prophets. In Israel itself, it is most likely that for some time after the return from exile, the body of teachings, Torah, continued to be the property and responsibility of the priesthood. We have seen that the exposition of the accumulated tradition of the people was one of the most important functions of priests and Levites, and this aspect of the sacred office would tend to become most important and have government sanction in the Second Commonwealth, which remained a theocracy in fact, and then in name, until the time of Herod the Great. The great revival of Israel, both nationally and culturally, was initiated by Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra was himself a priest, and evidently a member of that section of the priesthood which specialized in knowledge of the Torah and its teaching. He took it upon himself to continue in the priestly tradition of teacher to the people, and brought with him from Babylon a copy of the Torah, which he expounded before the assembly of the returned exiles. He stood upon a wooden pulpit above the people and read to them, surrounded by his assistants, the teaching Levites, who assisted him in his interpretation and exposition, which was done in a clear and detailed manner so that all might understand. This was probably the same manner in which the Torah was expounded on Mondays and Thursdays throughout the ensuing days of the Second Commonwealth, when advantage was taken of the Monday and Thursday market days in the cities of Palestine to read and expound the law to the people congregated there. Later, a method was worked out whereby the Torah was read in consecutive sections, the cycle being completed every 3 years. Thus was initiated the first large-scale program of adult education in history. And then it ends with a section on the education of the Jews in the New Testament period through the synagogues. In a formal sense, the most fundamental Jewish educational institution was the synagogue, which dates at least from the Babylonian exile. This institution grew up in response to the needs of Jews, now far from their homeland, for a means of maintaining their cultural faith. It was first of all a place of assembly in all matters of interest to Jewish community. It also served as a place of worship, but above all, it was a place of study. The school was conducted either in the synagogue proper or in rooms adjacent to it. Hundreds of synagogues came into existence wherever Jewish communities were found. So important did they become that they were built in Palestine, even in Jerusalem. Their educational function was so important that synagogues were not even thought of as rivals of the temple. Yet in fact the synagogue had essentially replaced the temple in Jewish life, even before the fall of AD 70. Its fall in AD 70. After the temple was gone, the synagogue was able to carry on Jewish culture without a serious break. Judaism had become more a matter of education than of temple rituals. Okay. So I'm going to leave there, but we will talk some more about a Bible reading schedule. I'm going to link to 2 things that David did early in our channel. One is called Education in the Old Testament, Whose Responsibility? And the second one, The High Call of Mothers in Israel.